My name is Raymond Caldwell. I'm 67 years old. I live in a stone-faced colonial on Birchwood Terrace in Asheville, North Carolina, the kind of house where every room has a story and the porch has enough of them to fill a book. I spent 32 years as a structural engineer with the North Carolina Department of Transportation, which means I spent my career understanding one fundamental truth. Everything that stands is only as good as what's underneath it. I retired 3 years ago. The plan was unhurried mornings, long walks along the River Arts District trails, and watching my daughter Claire build the life she had earned. Claire is 33 years old. She teaches 5th grade at Ridgeline Elementary School on Marymount Avenue, about 6 miles from my house. She has her mother's patience rare, bottomless, the kind that makes 28 10-year-olds feel genuinely seen, in my habit of taking notes by hand, which she would confirm is both a strength and an occasional social liability. Her mother, Diane, passed from an aneurysm in 2020. It was sudden and total and left a silence in this house that I don't think we'll ever fully fill. Since then, it has been Claire and me, the two of us navigating the world with a little more care than before. The way people do when they know firsthand how fast things can shift. So when Claire called me on a Sunday evening in early October 2023 and told me that Marcus Hale had proposed to her at dinner the night before, I did what any father who has loved and lost does when something good finally comes back around. I sat down in my kitchen chair and I pressed the phone hard against my ear, and I did not try to stop the tears. I'm not ashamed of that. Grief changes the way you receive happiness. It doesn't diminish it. It just makes it land differently, heavier and more precious at the same time. Marcus Hale, 31 years old, a wealth management advisor at a firm called Meridian Capital Group on Battery Park Avenue in downtown Asheville. He wore clean, uncluttered clothes. He listened when you talked. He used the word sir every time he addressed me, completely unprompted, from the very first dinner we shared. And if I'm being honest, that single habit had gone further toward winning me over than anything else he'd done. Claire had been with him for just over 2 years. In that time, I had met him 14 times, I counted. Because engineers count, and every single time he had been attentive, warm, and present in a way that read as genuine. I thought I understood who he was. The engagement party was Claire's idea, but the execution was mine. I insisted on covering everything. Claire pushed back the way she always does, Dad. It's too much. You don't need to. And I told her what I always tell her. Your mother would have wanted this done properly. That closed the conversation. Because it was true. And she knew it. I hired Sandra Voss of Voss Celebrations, a boutique event planning firm operating out of a restored mill space on Clingman Avenue. Sandra had been recommended to me by 4 different people whose judgment I trusted. And when I met her in her studio, I saw exactly why. She was organized and warm, and had the particular quality of someone who takes other people's milestones personally. She had planned over 175 events across the greater Asheville area since 2009. She knew every venue, every florist, every caterer worth knowing. The party was set for Saturday, November 4th, Liangtianling Arshasan, at a private event space called the Ridge Room on Lexington Avenue, which had exposed timber beams, warm Edison lighting, and a rooftop terrace with a long view over the city and the Blue Ridge beyond. We had 85 guests, family, Claire's teaching colleagues from Ridgeline, a handful of Marcus's co-workers from Meridian Capital, and Marcus's parents, Dennis and Carolyn Hale, who had flown in from Raleigh. Sandra's team handled everything, catering from a local restaurant called Grove Kitchen, a solo cellist for the cocktail hour, a DJ for the reception, and at Sandra's suggestion, a documentary-style videographer named Thomas, who moved through the evening with a compact gimbal camera, capturing everything in the quiet, unobtrusive way that only good visual storytellers can manage. Invisible. Everywhere. Recording everything. I did not know. Standing in that room, watching my daughter laugh in the amber light. That Thomas's camera would become the most consequential piece of evidence I would ever hold. The evening was everything I had hoped. Claire wore a rust-colored dress and her mother's gold bracelet. She looked like the best version of every good thing that had ever happened to me. Marcus gave a toast that was funny and genuine and landed so well that 4 people cried simultaneously, which I privately considered a solid indicator of success. Dennis and Carolyn Hale were gracious and easy. Dennis had spent 26 years as a high school track coach and had the steady, unhurried manner of someone who has watched a lot of young people become themselves. I gave my own toast near the end of the evening. I talked about Diane. I talked about what kind of man I hoped Marcus would be for my daughter. Present, reliable, honest. I looked directly at Marcus when I said the word honest. He held my eyes and nodded once. The nod of a man accepting something. The room applauded. Claire pressed her hand briefly over her heart. I sat down feeling, for the first time in years, that the world was offering something back. The party ended around 10:30. I helped Sandra's team load a few floral arrangements into my car. I shook Thomas's hand. I thanked Sandra for an exceptional evening. And I drove home through Asheville with the windows down and the November air cool and clean off the mountains. I slept that night with the deep, untroubled calm of a man who has done something right. The 3 weeks that followed were ordinary. Claire was happy. Marcus was attentive. They were touring properties together in the West Asheville neighborhood, talking about spring timelines, debating countertop finishes. Life moved forward the way it does when everything appears to be intact. Then the phone rang. Wednesday morning, November 29th. 2023. It was 8:11 a.m. I was on the River Arts District Trail, about 3/4 of a mile past the Clingman Avenue Bridge, my coffee going cold in my travel mug. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered it out of habit. 30 years of fielding early calls on infrastructure projects leaves its mark. Mr. Caldwell. Sandra Voss's voice. I knew it immediately, but the tone was not the warm, competent voice from the event. It was quieter, careful, the voice of someone who had been practicing a phone call for several days. Sandra. Good morning. Is everything all right? A pause, half a beat too long to mean yes. Mr. Caldwell. I need to ask whether you're somewhere private right now. I looked down the empty trail. A jogger had passed me 2 minutes earlier, going the other direction. No one else in sight. I'm alone on the trail. What is it I need to show you something? Something Thomas captured on the night of your daughter's party. Another pause. I need you to come to my studio. And Mr. Caldwell, please don't bring Claire. Don't tell her about this call. The November air that had felt so clean 3 weeks ago suddenly felt like it was coming from somewhere much farther away. Sandra. I kept my voice level. Tell me what we're talking about. I'd rather show you in person. I want you to see it yourself before we decide anything. Can you come this morning? I looked at my coffee. I looked at the French Broad River moving steadily alongside the path. I thought about Claire in her rust-colored dress and her mother's gold bracelet. Give me 40 minutes. I said. Sandra's studio on Clingman Avenue is inside a converted textile mill, high ceilings. Raw, brick. Long work tables made from reclaimed pine. When I walked in at 8:55, she was already there. No assistant present. No coffee offered. She stood when she saw me, and the expression on her face confirmed what her voice had already told me on the trail. This was serious. Thank you for coming quickly. She gestured to the chair across from her laptop. Please. Sit down. I sat. Thomas delivers his full packages within 2 weeks of each event. Sandra began. Her hands folded on the table with the composure of someone holding themselves together through deliberate structure. He sends me the complete raw footage, alongside the edited highlight reel. As he always does, I review the raw footage before I close out each event file. It's just part of my process. Quality control. She met my eyes. This time I found something. She turned the laptop toward me. I'm going to show you a segment from the raw footage. It was captured at approximately 9:22 p.m., about an hour before the party ended. Thomas was moving between the rooftop terrace and the main room. He passed through the back corridor near the service entrance. She paused. He didn't realize he was still recording. She pressed play. The footage was slightly unsteady. Handheld. Corridor lighting dimmer than the main room. The low sound of music through a closed door. Then two figures entered the frame. Marcus Hale in his charcoal blazer, and a woman I did not immediately place auburn hair. Navy dress. Standing close. Closer than the corridor's width required. Then Marcus's hand moved to her hip. And it was not casual or ambiguous in the least. The woman turned slightly and I recognized her. Brianna Cole, 26 years old. Junior associate at Meridian Capital Group. Marcus's colleague. She had been at the party as part of his work group introduced to me near the bar early in the evening. Professional. Composed. Pleasant. She'd had a glass of sparkling water. She had smiled at me. She had been in a relationship with my daughter's fiancé. And from what the footage showed, the ease of the contact, the absence of self-consciousness, it had been going on long enough that they no longer thought about being careful. On the screen, Marcus leaned close to Brianna's ear and said something. She laughed a quiet, private sound. Then she reached up and adjusted the collar of his jacket. Not the way a colleague would. The way someone does when they know the geography of a person. 12 seconds of footage. 12 seconds that told me everything I needed to know as a father, and everything my daughter deserved to hear from someone who loved her. I watched it twice without speaking. Sandra closed the laptop. The studio was very quiet. How long has Thomas been doing videography for your events? My voice came out steadier than I expected. 7 years. Has he seen this footage? No. He delivers the files and moves on to his next booking. He won't have reviewed that section. I nodded. And you haven't shown anyone else, only you. You're her father. This was your event. You should be the first to know. She paused. I'm sorry. Mr. Caldwell. Truly. In 15 years of doing this is the hardest call I've ever made. I looked at the closed laptop for a long moment. Then I stood up, thanked her, and walked out into the mill courtyard. The Blue Ridge Mountains were pale gold in the late November light. The air smelled like dry leaves and wood smoke. I stood there for a moment, not moving, doing the thing I had learned to do in 32 years of engineering work. When the numbers produced a result I hadn't anticipated, I didn't react. I received the information. Then I decided what came next. What came next was methodical. I drove home on autopilot down Klingman, up Merriman, right on Birchwood Terrace, and I sat in my driveway for 9 minutes before I went inside. I know exactly how long because I watched the clock on the dashboard and counted. When everything else is unstable, you fix on what you can measure. Inside, I brewed coffee and opened my notebook. Yellow legal pad. The same kind I'd used on every infrastructure project since 1991, and I wrote down 3 questions in the order I needed to address them. What do I know with certainty? What do I not yet know? What does Claire need from me right now? What I knew for certain, Marcus Hale had been physically intimate with Brianna Cole at his own engagement party. The party I had paid for. In a corridor 30 feet from the room where Claire was wearing her mother's bracelet and making plans. The footage was unambiguous. What I did not yet know how long the relationship had been ongoing. Whether anyone in Marcus's professional circle was aware, and whether Brianna Cole knew Marcus was engaged. or whether she was also being deceived. What Claire needed the truth. All of it. Delivered by someone who loved her. Not from a rumor. Not from an anonymous message. From her father, but not until I had built the complete picture. I called my attorney. His name is Warren Elliott. He's had an office on Biltmore Avenue for 25 years and answers his phone on the second ring at any hour. I gave him the situation plainly. Warren listened without interruption and then said exactly what I needed to hear. The footage was Sandra's property under the terms of her event contract. She had full legal standing to share it with her client. Me and I should document everything carefully before taking any action. Then I asked him something I hadn't planned on asking when I dialed. I asked if he could reach quietly into his network and find out whether Marcus Hale had any professional complaints or disciplinary filings on record. Warren said he'd make a call. I did not yet know that call would pull on something that had been unraveling for considerably longer than 3 weeks. Thursday, November 30th. 2023. I had slept perhaps 3 hours. I was at the kitchen table at 5:45 a.m. with my notebook when my phone vibrated with a text from Warren. Call me when you're up. Found something. I called him at 6:00. His voice carried the particular weight of someone delivering information he wishes he didn't have. Raymond. I spoke with a contact at the North Carolina Secretary of State's office, the division that handles investment advisor licensing and oversight. Marcus Hale has an active complaint against him. Filed approximately 10 months ago. Still under investigation. I set down my coffee mug carefully. What kind of complaint? Unsuitable investment conduct. A retired couple in Weaverville, Harold and Evelyn Marsh, filed a complaint alleging that Marcus moved their retirement portfolio into high-risk position structures without their adequately informed consent. They lost somewhere in the range of $43,000. The investigation is ongoing. No formal action yet. But it's in the record. Raymond. I wrote Harold and Evelyn Marsh. Weaverville in my notebook. Then I wrote $43. 000 beneath it and underlined it twice. Is this public record? I asked. Warren confirmed it was. I told him to get me the documentation. I hung up and sat for a long time at my kitchen table, looking through the window at the backyard where Diane had planted 2 dogwood trees the spring before she died. They were bare now. Winter stripped, but still standing. I thought about what kind of man had been calling me sir, and shaking my hand, and making toasts at my daughter's engagement party for 2 years. I drove to Weaverville on Friday afternoon. It's a 20-minute drive north of Asheville. Up Route 19. I pulled into the driveway of a small, well-kept split level on a cul-de-sac and knocked on the door with no particular plan beyond honesty. Harold Marsh answered. He was 73. He looked at me for a moment, this gray-bearded stranger at his door, and I told him exactly who I was and why I was there. He stepped back and let me in. Evelyn brought tea. We sat at their kitchen table, which had a vinyl tablecloth and a bowl of apples in the center. And Harold told me the whole story. Marcus had been assigned to their account 14 months prior after their longtime advisor relocated. In the first several months, he was attentive and communicative, called on birthdays, sent handwritten notes at the holidays. Then, gradually, he began recommending portfolio shifts away from the low-risk, income-focused structure they had specifically requested Treasury-weighted. Stable. Slow. He moved them into equity position funds and alternative vehicles that carried substantially higher volatility. He explained every change clearly. He used the right language. He made volatility sound like opportunity and risk sound like prudence. They trusted him. Then the positions moved against them. $43,000. Gone. When they asked for clarity, he cited external market conditions. When they filed the complaint, he stopped returning calls. Evelyn told me this with her teacup held in both hands. Not crying, but not far from it. Harold's jaw was tight the entire time. I thanked them both. I gave Harold my phone number. I told him I would be in touch. I drove back toward Asheville with the USB drive in my jacket pocket and a cold, functional clarity that I recognized from long experience, the feeling that arrives when anger finishes burning and leaves something useful behind. Saturday, December 20. 2023. Exactly 4 weeks after the engagement party. I called Claire in the morning and asked her to come for dinner that evening. Just the two of us. I told her I had something important to talk to her about. She heard what was underneath the words she always does. But the way children of people they love always do. And she was quiet for just a moment before she said she'd be there at 7. I spent the afternoon at the kitchen table organizing everything. The USB drive, Warren's documentation from the North Carolina Secretary of State's office, my notes from the Marsh family's kitchen table. I placed them in a craft folder in the order I intended to present them. Then I cooked dinner. Potrost. Claire's favorite since childhood, Diane's recipe. The one she had written on a note card in her handwriting that I've kept tucked in the back of my cookbook for 3 years. I thought about Diane throughout the entire process. I thought about what she would have done. She would have done exactly this, made the meal, set the table, told the truth with love, and trusted her daughter to be strong enough to hold it, because Claire had always been strong enough. She arrived at 7:20 with a bottle of wine and a smile that faded within 20 seconds of looking at my face. Dad, what's wrong? Sit down. Sweetheart, let's eat first. Dinner's ready. She studied me. You only make pot roast when something serious has happened. She wasn't wrong. We ate. I let her talk about her week. About a student who had finally broken through on long division after 6 weeks of struggling. About a kitchen renovation she and Marcus had started pricing out. She was happy. She was making plans. She was constructing a future in her mind, detail by detail. And I sat across from her and listened. And I gave her those last few unbroken minutes of certainty. Because once I put the folder on the table, they would be gone. Then I cleared the plates. I poured her wine. I sat back down. I placed the craft folder in the center of the table between us. She looked at it. She looked at me. Claire. I held her gaze. I love you. Everything I'm about to show you comes from that. And it ends there too. She nodded once. Her jaw set. She had already understood in some peripheral way that the folder was about to reorder things. I started with the footage. I described Sandra's call. The morning on the trail. The careful voice. The request to come alone. I told her about Thomas, the videographer. The raw footage review. The corridor near the service entrance at 9:22 p.m. I described what I had seen before I showed her, because I wanted her to have the words before the images. Then I turned my laptop around and played the clip. She watched it once. She didn't speak. She didn't move. Then she reached out and played it again. The second time, she paused it at the frame where Brianna adjusted Marcus's collar. She stared at it for a long time. Long enough that I reached across and placed my hand over hers. She pulled her hand back gently. Not with anger. She needed her hands to herself. I understood that completely. How long have you known? Her voice was flat and controlled. The voice of someone holding emotion in place through sheer discipline. 4 days. You waited to make sure you had everything. I did. She looked up. Is there more? There's more. I walked her through Warren's findings. The North Carolina Secretary of State complaint. Harold and Evelyn Marsh in Weaverville. The $43,000. The 14-month timeline. The complaint filed 10 months ago. Marcus continuing in his role under active investigation. Continuing to call me sir and open car doors and give toasts at engagement parties. While a retired couple's life savings sat tied up in a regulatory filing he was pretending didn't exist. Claire received all of it without interrupting. She got that from me when information is incoming. You receive it completely before you respond. You don't react and process at the same time. When I finished, she was quiet for nearly 3 full minutes. I counted. Then did he know you knew about the complaint? No. He has no idea I know any of this. And Brian, no. Does Sandra still have the raw footage? Yes. And there's a copy on the USB drive in that folder. Claire opened the folder. She went through Warren's documentation page by page. With the focused, systematic expression of someone applying a framework she knew well to material she had never expected to receive. She did not cry. Not yet. That would come later. Privately. And it would be entirely hers. What she did instead was something that told me, in case I had ever needed to be told, that Diane's strength had passed fully into her. I need your help to handle this the right way. Claire said. Not just for me. For the Marshes too. The following week, moved with the purpose that clarity provides, on Monday, December 4th, Claire contacted Marcus and told him she needed to speak with him. She met him at a coffee place called The Well on Lexington Avenue Neutral. Public. The kind of busy that keeps a conversation controlled. She went without me. At her own request. She carried the USB drive in her jacket pocket and the full weight of what was on it. She told me afterward what happened. She sat across from Marcus and said, very simply, tell me about Brianna Cole. That was it. No context. No preface. Just the name. The color drained from his face in under 2 seconds. She said it was the most honest thing she had ever seen him do. He tried to explain. He used the phrase, it wasn't serious. Which, as Claire noted afterward with the precise, quiet dryness that was entirely Diane's, was apparently meant to be reassuring. She let him talk. She let him build his defense. Then she set the USB drive on the table between them. There's footage, she told him, from the party. In the back corridor. I've seen it. My father's seen it. Our attorney's seen it. He stopped talking. She then told him about the Marshes. About the North Carolina Secretary of State complaint. About Warren Elliott. About the documentation in the craft folder. Marcus Hale sat in the Well on Lexington Avenue on a Monday morning in December, with the full accounting of his own choices laid out in front of him by a 33-year-old fifth-grade teacher in a corduroy jacket. He had nothing left. No easy manner. No practiced warmth. Just a man looking at the complete version of himself that he had spent 2 years hoping no one would fully assemble. Claire placed her engagement ring on the table. She stood up. She said, I'll need your things out of the apartment by Sunday. Then she walked out. I could not have been more proud of my daughter in that moment if I had spent a lifetime trying. Warren filed a formal letter of supplemental support on behalf of Harold and Evelyn Marsh on December 11th. 2023. To the North Carolina Secretary of State's Investor Protection Division, providing additional documentation for their existing complaint and requesting expedited review consideration. Harold Marsh called me 6 days later to say their case officer had been in contact regarding an escalation in the review process. I won't speak to the regulatory outcome because it remains ongoing, and I am not a lawyer. What I will tell you is that Meridian Capital Group's compliance office reached out to the Marsh family in January 2024 regarding the possibility of a settlement discussion. 2 people who had worked their entire lives and trusted the wrong person with the result of that work were finally, at least, being heard. Marcus Hale was placed on administrative suspension at Meridian Capital Group in mid-December 2023. I learned this through Warren's contact at the firm. I did not reach out to Marcus. I had nothing to say to him that Claire hadn't already said with considerably more precision than I could have managed. Brianna Cole, for what it's worth, had not known Marcus was engaged when things between them began. She reached out to Claire in January through a mutual acquaintance, asking to apologize. Claire chose not to respond. That was Claire's decision entirely, and I supported it without condition. I want to say something here that has nothing to do with revenge, because this isn't a story about revenge. It's a story about what decent people do when they refuse to be deceived quietly. What I carry out of this has nothing to do with Marcus Hale specifically. People like Marcus have always existed. They operate in the gap between what they appear to be and what they actually are. And they maintain that gap through practice, through hundreds of small performances of trustworthiness that train the people around them to stop looking for the seam. The corridor footage wasn't a single lapse. It was consistent with everything else: the Marsh account, the regulatory complaint, the months of managed appearances. The same man who moved a retired couple into unsuitable risk positions and continued smiling through the investigation was the same man who gave a toast at his own engagement party with his hand on another woman's hip in the corridor an hour before. Deception, at that level, is not situational. It's structural. And the reason it works is that the rest of us, decent people who extend the benefit of the doubt because that's what good people do, are not built to look for it. We take people at face value. We trust. We count 11 meetings and think we know someone. The lesson isn't about being more suspicious. The lesson is about what you do when the footage comes back. You don't act from rage. You act from love. You take your time. You bring in the right people. You make sure the people who deserve the truth receive it with care. And then you sit across the table from your daughter. And you make pot roast. And you tell her everything. Because she is strong enough. Because you know she is. Because the only thing worse than the truth is the life she would have built without it. Today is March 2024. Claire is well. She is still at Ridgeline Elementary. Still teaching her fifth graders. Still driving home through Asheville on winter evenings when the light comes low and amber through the gap in the mountains and makes the whole city look like it was worth something. Which it always is. She went to Portland for the holidays with her college friend, Donna. She came home with a new jacket, 4 books, and an ease around her eyes that I hadn't seen since before November. She comes to dinner every week. I have made Diane's pot roast more times in the last 4 months than in the previous 3 years combined. We talk about Diane. We talk about the dogwood trees in the backyard, which will bloom again in April. Pale pink against the gray bark. The same as every year. Regardless of what has happened in the months between. I am 67 years old. I have been through loss. I know what it takes to build something that holds. I spent 32 years on bridges and overpasses and load-bearing structures designed to last, engineered specifically to carry weight without failing. I also know exactly what happens when someone builds on a foundation they have deliberately compromised. It holds for a while. It always holds for a while. And then Sandra Voss reviews the footage.